So we're back, and it's been a while, but we're going to continue right where we left off, and that being spirituality. What is spirituality? That's a question and a definition that has multiple meanings, and I feel because of the multiple meanings we have multiple perspectives and a clash of perspectives. What must be understood, I feel first, is that there's a difference between spirituality and religion, and Christian fundamentalists will make this difference as well. However, I would like to point out that there is a major significant difference between what I'm saying and what they're saying. By religion, I think we can define it as dogma, conditioning, rules, law. In other words, we see the world and we translate the world according to a myth or a story. And whether you have a highly organized myth, such as the Catholic Church, or even forms of Buddhism, Islam, etc., that have very, very complex systems of belief, that's one. Another form of translation of myth is what the fundamentalists and the evangelists will do in America, where they say, oh, we're not practicing religion, we're practicing spirituality. We don't need to go to church. We have church in our hearts. God is always present. You see, though, they're fundamentally doing the same thing as the Catholics would be. I mean, sure, they're not. Catholics are being a little less literal and more interpretive, but the fundamentalists are doing essentially the same thing by focusing primarily on a myth. So they both share myth. So can you really say that evangelists are different than, say, old religion institutions? I don't think so. As far as the dogma goes, it's different. Evangelists tend to be more simple, direct, black and white. Catholicism is more of a diverse religion, however, it does have its own limitations. And this brings us to, well, let me first summarize. So we're basically saying that translation is a common ground for radicals and old institutions, myth makers. They believe myths. And I'm asking basically, is this spirituality? Is this it? Because if this is it, then what empiricists and rationalists and scientists will say is, well, there you go. It's a religion. It has a myth. The myth has been proven false. You can't prove it empirically. Where's the proof? And they'll discard it right there, along with Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny and Loch Ness and all that fun stuff. And the case of religion is closed. However, that does not close the book, and that actually is throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Because here you have, on the surface level, very basic religious institutions, basic myths. But what I'm asking is there anything deeper than the myth? Is there something more to the myth than just stories and fairy tales? I mean, we might as well be reading, some kind of fable or fairy tale from when you were young. Or is there some kind of transformative, deeper meaning in these things? There are two aspects of this I like to explore. The first happens to be allegory. Catholicism and other older institutions, as well as new theologists, will argue that religion has deeper meaning. Stories can be translated to have greater context, to have interpretive meaning that is not necessarily black and white. And the mystery of Catholicism, for instance, and the mystery of Adam and Eve, and any kind of story that allows interpretation and depth and metaphor, this color means that means this means transformation. It almost becomes more Gnostic in a sense, in that deeper sense. However, again, empiricism and science will say this simply does not do a damn thing. Because why? Why? Because basically you're still believing essentially in a myth. In that famous video, Magic Man did it. Google or YouTube this. Still, evolution versus science, that whole thing. Basically, they try to say, well, science, yeah, deeper meaning, yeah, but essentially, Magic Man created the Earth. Alright, I can see where this falls short, which is the first aspect. Allegory, interpretation. You're digging deeper, but maybe there's something more. Next part. Deeper spiritual meaning. Is there such a thing? I would say yes, and why I would say yes is, if you look at the mystics worldwide, you'll see that all of them are essentially saying the same thing in different surface languages. Sure, language is different, belief systems are different, dogma is different, myths are different. But if you dig deep into spiritual and religious practice across the world, you will see there is some kind of common underlying universal theme. That is, not that Magic Man did it, not that there are fairies and spirits. None of that. That there is something more than the physical plane. That there is something more than black and white. That there is something more than science and thought and rationality. That there could be something deeper and transformative. There's an underlying suchness or isness. There is a Godhead. There is the void. There is Zen, or dhyana. I don't know if that's correct pronunciation, but the Sanskrit term for practice of meditation. In the East, they practiced contemplative meditation in order to discover the nature of the self and the universe. And ultimately, what it means in the East is nothing. You are nothing, and you are everything. There is creation, and there is nothingness. There is suchness, and I believe this is a very important point to make, that you and other are not separate, that you and God are not separate, that you are not just the tiny ego, but there is so much more. And as well as there being so much more, there is absolutely and utterly nothing. One Zen term for this is mu. I still don't know if that's a correct pronunciation, but mu. Isness and non-existence. Wei Wu Wei is a Taoist term for meaning, what does it mean? Essentially, being and not being. Between the words, between the thoughts, trans-rational thought can be discovered worldwide, including Western mystics. Teresa of Avila, I believe that was her, yeah. It was one of the saints. The one who didn't age after death. I don't know if you believe any of that sort of thing. I'm not saying that's a miracle or not. Just trying to reference her. Another mystic. Meister Eckhart. Thomas Aquinas. Can't name any more off the top of my head, but there are plenty. And I can post further lists of mystics if you want on this YouTube video later on, because there definitely is a lot. So east and west, and let's not forget north and south, and northeast and northwest, and all that. Shamanism and animism and Native American practice worldwide does have a man-divine union. And again, the unmanifest world, and they'll discover this through hallucinogenic drugs, shamanic practices, etc., etc. And this brings me to one final point about religious practice and meditation, specifically meditation. Eastern meditation is actually more scientific than you would imagine. It doesn't posit anything except for direct experience. It posits this: you are one with God, you are one with the void. There is more to the ego. There is nothingness. And how am I saying this? Well, I've tried this practice out, and this is what led me to this experience. You can try it too. In fact, the very point of Zen is not to take anything on faith, but to directly experience the state. Try it out. And in that sense, it's very scientific.